This is something that occurred years ago when I was a child. I don't really remember my exact age. I was probably around 8 years old. Back then, I really liked to go to this park that was down the street from our house, where I lived with my little brother and parents. It only took about 2 minutes to walk to the park from our house. Our neighborhood was decently populated, and the park would get quite a few people. There was usually always an open swing I could go to, or I would go there with my brother, and we would just hang out. The park had the typical swings, monkey bars, slides, and some other equipment. It also had a little field, a small trail going around, and a parking lot. There were streets on 2 sides of it as well. One day, I think it was a Saturday morning, I went to the park by myself. I wasn't really supposed to go by myself, but I had done it a couple of times before, and it was fine. So, my parents had become a little loose with the rules. When I got to the park that day, nobody else was there. My brother also didn't go with me, and I can't remember exactly why. If I had to guess, he was probably either still sleeping or watching TV. I really liked being outside as a kid and had a lot of energy, so I walked there and then played around on the equipment. They had one of those things that's kind of like a zip line. I don't know what the playground version is called, but I know that I was on that for a little bit, and then I went to the swings. I was on the swings for a while, and by that point, I had probably been in the park for about 30 minutes. In that whole time, nobody else came to the park. The swings faced the road, and very occasionally, a car would drive by. I was about to stop swinging and go back home, and I remembered that a silver car drove down the street but was going really slow. I thought it was going to stop at the park because it was going so slow and looked like it was starting to pull over, but it didn't. It kept driving and then turned at the spot where the other street bordered the park. I watched it keep driving away, and eventually, it disappeared in the distance and out of my view. I was always a little suspicious of slow-moving cars as a kid. About a minute or so went by, and I started letting the swing slow down and come to a stop. When it did, I sat there and noticed that there was a man now walking down the sidewalk. The guy had sort of longer hair, and he was walking on the sidewalk in front of the park. He then entered the park, and he walked sort of into the play area for kids. He was moving slowly. It almost looked like he didn't know exactly where he was going. The guy also didn't have a child with him. This seemed a little strange to me, so I decided to just go home. I got up from the swing and walked back in the opposite direction of the man. I didn't look back at him and made my way to the sidewalk. Luckily, I didn't have to pass by him when I left. All I had to do was turn the corner and walk the 2 minutes or so back to our house. About a minute into the walk, when I could literally see my house in the distance, I heard a car approaching on the street from behind. I looked back and saw the same silver car as before. It was, once again, driving at an extremely slow pace. I kept walking, and the car took a while to even catch up to me. Eventually, it did, though, and it started to pass me by. I looked over out of curiosity and was surprised to see that the man with the long hair from the park was driving. The window was rolled down, and he started to look over at me. I looked away, and I was probably within 100 feet of my house. I cut into one of our neighbors' front yards because the guy in the car was making me nervous. I watched the car slowly keep driving and start to pass by my house. I cut through the rest of the neighbor's yard and then into our next door neighbor's front yard. Finally, I made it to my house. I quickly got to the front door and went inside. By that time, the silver car was a ways down, but I could still see it, and it was still moving very slowly. I went inside and forgot all about it, thinking that was the end of it. But several hours later, I went back outside into the front yard. I was outside for no longer than 5 minutes before I once again saw the silver car starting to drive slowly down the street. I immediately ran back inside as fast as I could. Once I was inside, I watched out the front window as the car passed by our house and kept going. It maintained the snail speed it had been going before. I knew something strange was going on, but I didn't know exactly what. For the rest of the day, I didn't notice it. I stayed inside and felt safe in the house. It was a normal Saturday for the rest of it. However, late that night, I was up late watching TV with my parents. I heard them start to talk about something as I was still watching TV. When I looked over, they were noticing something out the window. That's when I saw the flashing police lights a little ways down our street. My parents were wondering what exactly was going on. Soon, they realized that the police had stopped a car, which happened to be the same silver car. After several minutes, everybody drove away, and I told my parents about my experience with that car. They ended up calling the police about it, and I found out later that the man was pulled over because another neighbor reported him as a suspicious vehicle. He had been seemingly circling the block late at night, driving extremely slowly. I'm really glad the police stopped him. I sometimes wonder if he had intentions to break into our house or something like that. My boyfriend and I like to visit a park in our town. Occasionally, when we go, we walk around the trail and play on the playground. One night, we decided to head there. Once we arrived, we realized it was too cold to go on the playground or walk the trail, so we decided to just sit in the parking lot and talk. We were having a normal conversation about everyday things when a red car slowly pulled into the parking lot. At the time, we were the only ones there, as the park is usually quiet in the evening. A woman appeared to be driving the red car, and she pulled up in front of us. At first, we were confused about who she was and what she was doing. We thought it might be someone we knew trying to mess with us. However, as we got a closer look, we realized it was a woman we had never seen before. She parked her car in front of ours, blocking us in, and just stared at us without moving or looking away. She had a really creepy look about her, and everything seemed off. She continued to stare at us with a blank, unsettling expression. After a few minutes, she reversed her car, still keeping her eyes locked on us, and backed up a little. Then, she stopped again and continued staring. At this point, we were both confused and starting to feel scared. Then she moved her car again, this time parking right next to us. After she parked, she stared at us for a little longer before finally looking away, appearing to check her phone. I wasn't sure what she was doing, but my boyfriend was ready to roll down the window to say something to her. I had a bad feeling about the situation, so I told him we should leave immediately. We drove away, and as we did, the woman began reversing her car, as if she was going to follow us. Fortunately, we had a head start and drove off quickly. Thankfully, the woman didn't follow us. Later, as we discussed what had happened, I felt chills all over. I don't know who the woman was or what she wanted, but it remains one of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me. This happened 2 years ago when I lived alone in an apartment complex. It was a large complex, and I had a couple of friends living there too. Next to the complex was a park with a long trail that connected to a wooded path. Many people, including myself, used it for walking or exercising. One day, my friend Anna, who lived below me, told me something unsettling. The previous night, she was walking on the trail when she heard footsteps behind her as the sun set. When she sped up, the footsteps did too. She looked back and saw a man disappearing into the woods. Spooked, she jogged out of the trail and made it home safely, unsure if it was a coincidence or something more sinister. The next night, despite her story, I found myself walking the same trail after sunset. It was quiet, and I didn't see anyone else. By the time I was heading back, it was completely dark. About 10 minutes from my apartment, I heard footsteps behind me, which brought back Anna's story. I glanced back and saw a man in the distance. I quickened my pace, but the footsteps continued, now coming from the woods. As he emerged back onto the path, he was about 30 feet behind me. I started jogging, and he matched my pace. I quickly dialed 911 and put the phone on speaker, loudly telling the operator I needed the police. As soon as I did, the man darted into the woods again, but kept running behind me. Eventually, I stopped hearing him, and it seemed like he had run the opposite way. I made it out of the trail and back to my apartment. The police arrived shortly after, but they couldn't find the man. A letter was later sent to all residents warning them of a potential stalker in the park, advising against walking there at night. Luckily, I never encountered the man again. I just hope he didn't start doing the same thing somewhere else. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.